To the episode of Rock Boys Football. Dill sitting here Saturday afternoon, and we have a very interesting developing storyline as it sounds like former Georgia Tech head coach Geoff Collins going to be joining this South Carolina coaching staff rolling into 2025. Now, look, Geoff Collins, a very polarizing coaching figure. I'll get up here and say this. I mean, I look at Geoff Collins and say, yeah, downright bad as a head coach at Georgia Tech. Ain't nobody going to argue against that. Go look at the sample size of what this guy was as a defensive coordinator, proven in the SEC. Both at Mississippi State and Florida. One thing you can't really argue, hey, maybe a bad head coach, maybe a bad CEO of a program, but when it comes to X's and O's and player development on the defense side of the football, I think Geoff Collins is really dang good. And the reason we wanted to sit down here and talk about it Saturday afternoon. One, the boys don't have much of a social life, but number two, Dill, this is why I love South Carolina and where they're going as a program. Like my optimism with South Carolina does not only start and stop in 2025. Like why am I excited about where Shane Beamer can take this program? Look at the coaching staff. I think it's one of the best coaching staffs that you see in the entire country. Shane Beamer puts a lot of time into curating a really good coaching staff. And look, you're getting a former SEC defensive coordinator. You're getting a former Power 4 head coach that's joining your coaching staff as an assistant. Like that is a very quality hire, at least in my opinion, for South Carolina. Now, I got some takes about Geoff Collins. Got some more takes about this South Carolina coaching staff before we do. And as always, want to give a shout out real quick to the guys over at 24/7 Sports all over this storyline. I'm perusing, some South Carolina news, and I see this one pop up. If y'all are diehard South Carolina fans, I think they do a great job. They've been on top of this one. And to the South Carolina fans, would love to hear how you guys are feeling in the comment section. Look, there are going to be a lot of South Carolina fans that like this move. There are going to be some South Carolina fans that say, I want no part of Geoff Collins. I understand that too, because it hasn't been great for him the last couple of years. Want to get into a little bit more. Dill, I'm going to give you the T-box here. Geoff Collins coming to South Carolina. I misspelled his name in the banner, so I'm going to fix that while you are talking. How are we feeling about Geoff Collins coming to South Carolina?
And I like this type of move. And I think the first thing I think is like it does show a little bit more confidence in the sustainability, at least from the outside of what Shane Beamer is building. Because Geoff Collins isn't necessarily coming here to be an analyst for 15 years. Like he is trying to get himself back into the job market, let's say, in a more meaningful way. And I think you look at Clayton White's put himself in a really good opportunity to get a big job moving forward. I think obviously Dowell Loggins got himself a head coaching job. I think you just see more of a pathway to elevate yourself as Shane Beamer gets South Carolina rolling. And I think that's big because that's what made Nick Saban hard to deal with at Alabama is he just like year after Lane Kiffin to Steve Sarkisian to Bill O'Brien. Like they didn't really miss a beat. He could always hire really good coaches because Alabama was a place that coaches could go do a good job and get elevated. And that's what Geoff Collins clearly thinks about the South Carolina team. That's why he's there.
Dylan, it feels kind of similar to what happened with Dowell Loggins and Mike Shula last year. You had a former NFL offensive coordinator that was sitting on South Carolina staff as a senior analyst. And it's like, well, that seems a little funky. Well, I think Shane Beamer probably knew, look, Dowell Loggins, what he's doing, we might have to replace Dowell Loggins sometime soon. You're probably saying the same thing for a guy like Clayton White. I think Clayton White's one of the best DCs in the game. Would not be surprised if a G5 program comes calling for him as a head coach. Well, if that happens in the next 12 months, or if that happens in the next 24 months, you got a guy in Geoff Collins who very well could be a guy that comes in and becomes your next defense coordinator. And look, I ain't saying you blindly give him the job, but you're getting him between the walls. You're getting a feel for what he can bring to South Carolina. It's going to make that decision on who your next defensive coordinator is when and if Clayton White leaves a little bit easier because you're going to be familiar with a guy like Geoff Collins.
You'll have internal options with Geoff Collins. I think Sterling Lucas will probably be in the
Torian Gray.
Like there's going to be guys on the staff who you'd feel good about. And again, I think if you're going to be a good program, you're not going to be able to keep your defensive coordinator for 15 years. Like the Glenn Venables situation, let's say at Clemson, very, very unique. It's really hard to keep elite DCs, elite OCs, because again, when they get really good, and your program wins a lot, they get head jobs. And I think that's where Shane Beamer's got to get this program. And it does look like he's trending it towards that
Yeah.
direction. And then having coaches kind of like being backfilled earlier than just when you immediately need them,
Yeah.
I think it's going to be important.
I agree. I mean, South Carolina arguably messed up some hires early. You know, like a guy like Coach Satterfield, probably not the best hire. I think Shane Beamer's hires have been money over the last couple of years. I look at can we talk more about Geoff Collins real quick? Because look, I get if you're a South Carolina fan, you say, well, he was horrible at Georgia Tech. Then he went to North Carolina in 2024, wasn't very good as their defensive coordinator at North Carolina. Number one with Georgia Tech. Dill, we see a ton of really good defensive coordinators that just aren't great head coaches. That's not all that rare, especially at the college ranks, but you can also find evidence of that in the NFL. Then I look at him taking over that North Carolina job. Dill, that North Carolina defense was a dumpster fire for 5 years. That was going to be very hard for him to come in 1 year and just turn that sucker around. So I'm not saying I'm ignoring the last couple of years of Geoff Collins as a coach because it hasn't been great. Go back and look at him at Mississippi State, where Mississippi State, a program like Mississippi State, led the SEC in sacks when he was their defensive coordinator. Then he goes to Florida. They have the number 11 scoring defense in the country in 2015. And then the number 6 scoring defense in 2016. I mean, this was a guy that before he began his head coaching career at Temple and then Georgia Tech was widely regarded as one of the best defensive coordinators in the SEC. And so that's the kind of coach that you're getting to be an analyst for South Carolina, can kind of maybe resurrect his coaching career a little bit with Shane Beamer over the next couple of years.
And that's the big thing. Like, you're not making him your defensive
I agree.
coordinator.
Yeah, it's low
Frankly,
risk.
I probably have an element of questions going from the past 5 years or so of his career where it's like it
Agreed.
just hasn't been great. So I think you look again, Steve Sarkisian, you could have said the same things about him, Lane Kiffin, kind of similar, where
Agreed.
there were points in their career where they hit some major adversity, and then Alabama scoops them up not to be the headline offensive coordinator, but to kind of rise up through the ranks, the analyst position, and then eventually probably either move on or take over the coordinator spot. I look, there's just not a ton of risk to this move because you still do have
Zero risk, man.
There's
There's zero risk. You get him in the building. If you think he provides a lot of value and Clayton White moves on, then maybe you got a defensive coordinator that's already like knows the players and knows the scheme. And they feel like, hey, Geoff Collins, you hire him and say, hey, maybe we don't love it. And you got a couple of really good coaches to choose from at position groups, or you can go out and make a good hire as well. This coaching staff, man. I mean, Clayton White, y'all know how I feel about him. And T-Rob and Sterling Lucas on the defensive line, all elite. You look at the back end with Torian Gray, it is boxes are checked for the South Carolina coaching staff. Here's the last thing I'll say with Geoff Collins. He's been DC area, that recruiting footprint of South Carolina, pretty much his whole coaching career. Go look at what he's done as a recruiter. He's done a very good job. And so you're adding a guy that's got some real connections in the Carolinas. He's got some real connections in the state of Georgia and even down in the state of Florida during his time at Florida. So this is a guy that I think can be an asset to you on the recruiting trail. And we talk about this all the time too. Like, how does South Carolina get the staying power at the top of the SEC? Got to start recruiting the guys that Georgia and Alabama get too. Maybe Geoff Collins can provide some value out there on the recruiting trail as well. You said it best. It's a low risk. I would argue maybe a high reward kind of guy. This guy could be a very good defensive coordinator for South Carolina over the next couple of years. We'll kind of see how it plays out. But this is not a risk, in my opinion. I like it. And I especially like Shane Beamer just continuing to try to make this coaching staff as elite as possible. Because you look at it in this NIL rev share, the talent's already getting dispersed. We see that. It's going to come down to coaching and player development, of which South Carolina, I think, is doing a great job because of the way Shane Beamer has built this staff. We'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.